Welcome back, folks. We're a day late. I actually am feeling quite a bit better. I know I put out on the social feed on the channel that it may be a 2 to 3 week vacation. I had some issues pop up last week with my foot that actually put me in the hospital this last week on Monday. And thanks to some amazing doctors that have got me on the right medications and so on, I'm on the road to recovery. I'm already feeling quite a bit better. So I figured I'd get back into it. This will be posting as soon as I'm done getting everything put together, and then hopefully back to the schedule next week. You can tell slight dermatological stuff still going on, but I'm not going to let it hold me back. We finished off last time, with the War of 1812, and this is really where, in my mind, it solidifies that we truly are our own sovereign nation. In the 1770s, the British showed up and said, give up your guns. We said no. We fought a war. We won. 1812-ish, we fought another war where the British were really trying to reassert control, and we won. And this is where you see the country start to really take off. Now, just in a nutshell, really beginning in 1793, we have Samuel Slater inventing the spinning mill. We have John Deere and with the plow, which really did boost the agriculture. I mean, you're able to now plow far more than you would with a mule. 1793 also is when Eli Whitney developed the cotton gin. Now, for a time, this actually did increase slavery because any brand new technology is going to be incredibly expensive. Think about Ford motor vehicles when Henry Ford pioneered the assembly line. Prior to that, when you wanted a Ford, it had to be built by hand. So this is something that took months to design, build, paint, test, and get everything ready. It wasn't until the assembly line that production became less expensive. That would eventually happen with the cotton gin and with other agricultural machinery, but when it was introduced, people said, why am I going to spend the money on that when I can keep going the way it is? I do still believe that probably within 20 years after the Civil War, had that never happened, slavery would have been on such decline due to, you look at it, 67 years before the beginning of the Civil War, the cotton gin had been pioneered. In that almost 7 decades, it would have been growing in popularity, growing in availability. I do believe by the 1680s, slavery would have been on the decline and almost on the way out. We can't change it. We can't know for sure. But as you watch this, you're going to see the growth of tenant farmers. Slavery itself was a very small segment of the U.S. population. Only 3% of the population owned slaves. Most people in the country, the vast majority, did not. A lot of them in the South and in the Northwestern Territories were tenant farmers. They would farm the land, but they didn't own the land. So a portion of their crop or a portion of their money that they sold the crop for went to the landowner. In 1831, we have the rebellion, Nat Turner's Rebellion. It was a slave uprising. Unlike Rome, though, that trained their slaves to be fighters, that wasn't, of course, happening here. It still scared the slave owners. It frightened them that their slaves could rise up and work together to free themselves. So it resulted in harsher laws. Now, looking more in depth into this time, we have really 1816 is the beginning of what they called the era of good feeling. We had just won a second war. Land was becoming plentiful. People were starting to feel better about the country in the big picture. Doesn't mean we had just 100% paradise. That's never going to happen. If you were a slave, if you were a woman, you weren't able to vote still. If you didn't own land in some cases, you weren't able to vote. But economically, we were growing. Monroe was elected the 5th president in 1816, and he was widely accepted as he toured the country. To the point in 1820, it was an almost unanimous re-election. During this time, we have Henry Clay also creating the Bank of the United States to create a single currency. Tariffs on foreign goods, not only to increase U.S. Manufacturing and sales of U.S. goods, but also the money from those tariffs went for public works. We had the National Road from Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois. And this opened up trade and opened up commerce, opened up travel so wide for the northern U.S. that it really would become basically the precursor to our interstate system, where you have these roads built to connect the country. The Erie Canal, built almost by hand, was built to connect the Great Lakes to New York City. It's not to say everything was perfect, though. There was a great sectional divide between the North and the South. The North favored high tariffs. The North wasn't the one producing cotton and wheat, barley, and all the rest of the crops. They weren't the ones raising the animals. So they wanted high tariffs. The problem is, in the South, they were having to import their goods. Okay, we still weren't producing everything the country needed. As I was saying, the Southerners, due to importing their goods, because there was no else to get them, favored the lower tariffs. And of course, this is going to cause strife. So of course, they had to come to some kind of compromise. So in the Northwest, we have the new territories open. The Northerners wanted to sell the land at high prices, mostly to discourage the poor from leaving the cities. They needed the poor. They needed poor people who would take any job they could, multiple jobs in some cases. And if land was plentiful and cheap, the poor would leave. The West, however, wanted to sell the land at lower prices so that they could have roads and other public services. So in this area, we had a lot of opportunity and a lot of disagreement on what was happening. In 1820, Henry Clay came up with a solution for the land that we had gotten in the Louisiana Purchase. In 1817, Missouri, of course this is still in the early 1800s, slavery was a strife, applied for statehood, but as a slave state. This would upend the balance of slave states versus non-slave states. Basically, Missouri would enter as a slave state. Maine would split from Massachusetts to become a free state, thus keeping the balance. In the future, all applications would be free states if they are north of the southern border of Missouri, basically 36 degrees north, 30 minutes. In the new borders, 1860. Actually, no, sorry, that's the last page I was on. So, in moving on from here, there are still forces that don't want us to succeed. They're watching this. They're watching the slave versus free state. They're watching the land sales in the Northwest. They're watching the battle over tariffs. They're watching the battle over tenant farmers. They're watching people try to become industrious and create new things. And they're praying for us to fail. But ultimately, they have to settle with us. England, of course, we had been very tense with since the 1770s. They wanted to rule the colonies. But they realize now, after 2 attempts, they're not going to get to. So we agreed that there would be no Navy in the Great Lakes region or along the U.S.-Canada border at the 49th parallel. With that, our relations with England improved, but there was tensions between the U.S. and Spain. The U.S. claimed Western Florida belonged to us due to the Louisiana Purchase. Of course, Spain believed all of Florida belonged to them. As U.S. citizens are moving into Western Florida, though, the Seminole Indians began working to help slaves escape their plantations. In 1818, and this could have gone very badly for him, Andrew Jackson invaded Spanish territory, capturing 2 forts, and started the First Seminole War, leaving John Quincy Adams 2 choices: to either reprimand Jackson or go along with it. He chose the latter, and he offered two choices to Spain. One, they could police the entire territory. They would have to send God only knows how many troops to police all of Florida. They didn't want to do that. It would have bankrupted them, probably. Or they could sell the land to the U.S. Ultimately, they did. They sold Florida and their other claims to the U.S. for a total of $5 million. Now, you have to remember, this is almost exactly 200 years ago. I can't even begin to do the math to figure out what $5 million in 1818 would be today. But you can imagine it's a staggering amount for a very small piece of land in the grand scheme of things. But it continues the expansion of the United States. We now span the eastern seaboard, north to south, from the 49th parallel to the tip of Florida. We were spanning west at a phenomenal rate. We were admitting new states to the Union. And by and large, we're getting past our problems. We were working through them. It's not to say that everything is going to be just sunshine and roses and all that, but you can see that there was an era where people did, by and large, feel good about their country as a whole. We were no longer fighting against England for our sovereignty. We were expanding, allowing for people to own land, people to better their lives. The North saw the issue of slavery being addressed, where you couldn't be a slave state north of a certain north of a certain line, save one state, which caused that rule to be passed. Industrial, just idea after idea after idea was coming out, from the plow to the cotton gin to the spinning wheel. I mean, these things were becoming more common, so that now you're not having to have women sit and spin, or children sit and spin yarn or spin cotton into thread. Now we have the spinning mill. You're not having to have 5, 10, 15, or 20 men with a mule and a plow to plow a field. The John Deere plow can do that in a shorter time and more efficiently. You don't have to have hundreds of people harvesting cotton. The cotton mill will do that, or cotton gin will do that, but they're still expensive. Only those who had a lot of money. So if you put it in terms of today, only Haynes could afford a spinning mill. Very few others could. They would still be doing it by hand, and Haynes would outstrip them. Only 1% of the people who grow cotton could afford cotton gin, and that would only help them become more productive. Only, say, the McDonald's cooperative of farms could own a John Deere plow, leaving the rest of them to plow by hand. And for a time, that is what's going to happen. You're going to see that divide between people who do use and people who don't use the new technology grow. But as that does, that gives the Eli Whitneys and the John Deeres and the rest time to innovate and better their designs. And that's where we're going. That's where we see the country go from this point on. Even today, when you think about this item right here, iPhone. 25 years ago, roughly, we got our first cell phones. They were clunky, bar phones. Although the camera phone flip came out pretty quick. I mean, we had that by 99, 2000. But they were phones. And in some cases, they had a camera. So you could have a photo caller ID if you stored the number. Only 20 years after that, I have the computing power of Apollo 11 in my pocket. And it's getting more and more and more advanced every year. The iPhone 12 is going to be so much smaller than the iPhone that I have and able to do far more. That's what we're seeing the beginnings of here. People who have an idea. people who, like Steve Jobs in the 70s, have an idea and put that idea together. Then they start that idea. And as the idea grows, they bring other people in who can help better that idea. And as that idea grows and other ideas offshoot, you just see the entire world change. And it all started right there. That's all I have for you today. It wasn't really much, but I wanted to get that covered. We're going to pick up next time with the Monroe Doctrine, which probably will be the entirety of the video, because there's a lot to that. But it is an important part of our history. For now, thank you for watching. I do want you to make sure to let me know what you think in the comments. Just be civil. We're adults here. We're not children arguing over ice cream. Please remember that, and treat each other civilly. As always, please remember to like and share the video to widen the conversation, to affect the algorithm, and remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so videos that are not on the schedule, like this one, you will be aware when they post. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.